Hey, what's up, cats and kittens? And shout out to all my cerebralites. It is me, the Cerebral Diva, and I am going to do my very first story time today. So, the title of the story time is going to be Why I Will Never Use a Mechanic or Any Service Professional from Craigslist. So, let's dive right into this story time. So, I have a home based business that I've been operating now for probably about the last 6 years. Being that I have a home based business, my car gets driven very infrequently. So for that reason, I don't drive a very nice car. I mean, I drive a decent car, but it's not top of the line. Now, I could definitely go buy something top of the line, just so you know. So let me put that caveat there. But I just haven't done so because it just doesn't seem very pragmatic, being that it won't be driven. It will just be sitting basically in my garage. So I have a point A to point B car. Now this point A to point B car has been very reliable. Um, I have had very little mechanical issues. It's even though it's not the best car, it's still in great shape. It's still clean. There's no dents, no rust, none of the crazy things. There's not a muffler or tailpipe hanging off. So it's in really good shape. However, I've been having some issues as of late. So, about a month ago, I went out to run some errands and I pressed the fob, the keyless entry to open the door, and I didn't hear a click. The door didn't open. So, I pressed it a few more times and still the doors didn't open. So, I got closer to the car and realized that there was no power. So I manually opened the door, put the key in the ignition, and I heard that dreaded tick, 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 tick sound that you hear when your battery is dead. So I'm like, oh gosh, now I have to go and get a new battery. So I get a jump start from a friend. And when I get the jump start, now I'm looking at the lights to make sure that the lights are in the off position, because I had let a very close friend of mine drive my car, and I was sort of the belief that maybe he had inadvertently left the lights in the on position, but they were off. So anyhow, I go to get a new battery because my battery is still under warranty, and they replaced the battery. The car is running like new basically. And so life is good. I'm on the road, everything's working great. I come home and I may drive maybe 2 or 3 times a week. So for the most part, like if I go out someplace or I'm doing something, typically the person that I'm doing it with is picking me up and we're doing it together. So there's not a lot of cost for me to drive. So as I said earlier, my car sits idle for sort of these large interim periods. So it had been about 2 or 3 days since I had the new battery installed. So I go back out. I press the fob once again to open the door, and yep, you guessed, the battery's dead. So at this point, I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, how is my battery dead twice? This makes absolutely no sense, because I've been conscious about making sure that every single light was turned off when I got in and out of this car, because I did not want to have a repeat of what had just happened a couple of weeks ago. So when it happened this time, a light bulb goes off. Like, this isn't just a battery issue. There's something going on. Now, if you know anything about cars, and this is obviously not my first car, there's sort of a process of elimination you go through when you're having car issues. And the very first thing I thought of, okay, well, if my battery is being drained, it's the alternator. So I take it in, we get it tested, and it's not the alternator. We get a new battery. Car's running fine. Same thing happens about maybe 3 or 4 days later. So now we know that it's not the alternator. Now we know it's not the battery. And so now we have to figure out what is causing this draw on my battery. So I hate going to car garages, to mechanics garages, because it seems like it takes forever. It's just not my favorite place to be. So I decided that I wanted to look into a mobile mechanic to, at the very least, have someone come out to my house to diagnose the problem before I had to bite the bullet and actually go sit at Midas for an entire day. So what I did, and I know you can get a ride to and from Midas, but I'm one of those people. If my car is there, I want to be there. I kind of have to keep an eye on what's going on. So, I'm a micromanager. It's just a personality tick. I'm sorry. So, so I started looking into mobile mechanics because I wanted to have someone come out to my house to look at the car, so that way I could avoid having to go to an actual garage. So I look around. Oh, I don't know why I did it, but for some reason, against my better judgment, I decided to look on Craigslist for a mobile mechanic. Now, there were a couple of them. And before I called them, I started Googling their number, looking for reviews and seeing if there were any negative reviews and seeing the sort of experiences that other people may have had or had not had with these particular service providers. So I found two. So mechanic number one, we set up a time for him to come, and typical Craigslist flake, he doesn't show up on the day that he's supposed to. But he did call and say that he was running late and that he would come later. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But later turned into like maybe 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. And at that point, it's getting a little dark. So it just didn't seem very feasible to me at that point to have him come out. So I elected to wait until the next day. Day two, he does the same thing again. So at this point, I'm like, okay, never mind. We're just going to find someone else. So I called the second mechanic. This guy had some really good reviews. He seemed very professional. When I called him and explained the situation to him, I let him know that my battery had basically gone dead twice, and we checked the alternator, and that there has to be some sort of other parasitic draw on my battery. So he's like, oh, great. I work on cars. I'm ASC certified. I'm really great at what I do. I stand by my work, blah, 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 blah. So he's really selling himself. He's giving me the hard pitch. So I'm like, okay, great. So we set up a time for him to come the following morning at 7 a.m. So I usually wake up around maybe 5 a.m. in the morning. I typically go to the gym around maybe 5:30 until maybe around 7. So the fact that he was coming at 7 really worked well with my schedule. So I get up, I go to the gym. After I'm done working out, I call him, and because I just want to confirm to make sure he's still coming. I actually text him. I didn't call. So I text him and he said, yes, I'm on my way. I'm en route. Okay, great. So I'm excited. Okay, he's punctual. He's on his way. This is great. So the guy shows up, and when he shows up, he's just, I don't know. We all have this sixth sense, that we're endowed with, and some of us tend to ignore it. But I wouldn't necessarily quantify it as a sixth sense, but there was just something a little sort of off kilter about this guy. Not off kilter in a way that made me feel like he would be violent or like he was a serial killer, but there was just something about his energy, like he was a closed eye talker. Like some people close their eyes and talk to you, and that's like the weirdest thing to me. So he's like, his eyes are closed, but he's having a full-blown conversation with me. So, in my mind, I'm sort of logging this data, but he seems somewhat knowledgeable. So we agree, we start talking about the car, and I start telling him about the issues that I'm having and the things that I've done. So midway through me explaining what the issues were, he pulls out this sort of receipt that he has, and he writes down the color of my vehicle, the license plate, what the problem is, blah, 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 blah. Oh, and before that, Let me go back just a little bit back to when I initially contacted him. So when I was contacting him, asking him if he could come, one of the things that I asked specifically was, is this something you think that you could fix? Because if you can't fix it, then I don't really, what's the problem? What's the point in having you come out? Now I know that it's hard to say whether you can fix something or not sight unseen, but what I was more concerned with, was he able to diagnose the problem more so than fix the problem? So he said to me, well, I'm so great at what I do. I'll tell you what, if I can't fix it, the trip will be free. If it's free, it's for me. So free 99 all day long. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is a great deal. So at the end of the day, if he can't fix the problem, then hey, no harm, no foul. So back to the story. So he's writing down all my information on this makeshift receipt that he has. And then he comes over to me after he's written down, the make and model of my car and all the pertinent information. And he says to me, excuse me, okay, I need you to sign right here. And so I don't know about you, but I take my signature very seriously. I'm not putting my signature on anything that I do not understand 100%, because your signature can get you in a lot of trouble. So you need to be very, very careful about where you put it. So as I look over the receipt, I see that it says a $30 trip charge, $45 per hour, total $75. So he's basically asking me to pay him $75 in advance of doing any work. So I say to him, well, I don't feel comfortable signing this, so I'm not going to sign this. And he says, well, why not? And I said, well, I don't believe in paying for work in advance. You pay upon delivery, you pay upon completion. But what I will do is give you $30 cash for the trip charge, because he's here. So clearly he's honored that portion of the deal. So the trip charge, I felt, was his, that he had earned that just by virtue of being here. So I give him the $30, and I pop the hood to my car. He opens it, and the first thing he says is, oh, it's your battery. No, it's not my battery. And I'm trying to be as amiable, as respectful as possible, because at the end of the day, I'm not a mechanic. But I know, just based on a process of elimination, that it's not the battery. The battery is a symptom of a greater problem. I just had this battery installed like 2 weeks ago, and it's dead already. So that tells me, based on the fact that there was 2 batteries prior to that had the same problem, that either I'm the unluckiest battery picker in the world, or something in my car is causing these batteries to go bad. So he's like, no, well, you have a dead cell. You have a dead cell in the battery. Well, yeah, the battery is dead, hence a dead cell. So I understand that the battery is dead. But why is the battery dead? And I'm trying to sort of underscore that I get that the battery is dead, but I'm trying to make him understand that I need him to focus on the fact that something is killing the battery, that the battery isn't suicidal. Like, something is killing my battery. My battery isn't jumping off the bridge by itself. So I'm going back and forth with this guy about what I've done. So at one point he starts to get frustrated with me, and he says, well, it seems like you don't trust me. And I say to him, well, it's not a matter of me not trusting you. It's that what you're telling me does not make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, I need you to keep explaining it to me until it does make sense. Because what I'm not going to do is shake my head and be polite and look pretty and wind up not getting what I'm paying for. So he's like, well, I'll tell you what, if we put a new battery in and it doesn't work, I'll come back and we'll get it taken care of. Well, what the hell are you here for now? Like, this is a one and done. I don't want you to come back a few days later. I want this problem corrected today. If it cannot be corrected, at the very least, can you, as a professional, as the mechanic who stands behind his work, can you tell me what the problem is? So even if it's not corrected today, I now have the information moving forward that I know exactly what the problem is and how to attack it. So he's getting frustrated with me. Frankly, I'm getting frustrated with him. I'm in my head, I'm saying, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? This is not going to work. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. I'm sort of having all of these thoughts just bubbling in my head at once. So at one point he says to me, well, let me take your battery and I'm going to go have the battery tested. So I thought about it for a second, because I'm like, no, don't let him take your battery. And then I was just like, you know what? Just let him take the battery so that at least it will make your point. So he takes the battery. He's gone for about 45 minutes to AutoZone, Pet Boys, one of those places that test batteries. And he calls me when he's on his way back and says, see, I told you it's the battery. So at that point, when he told me that it was the battery, I'm like, this dude does not know what he's doing. Get out of this and get out of this fast. So I said to him very politely, can you just please return my battery, and we can just go our separate ways. So he says to me, well, are you going to pay me for my hour? And I said, absolutely not. The deal was, if you fix the problem, you're compensated. You've already gotten a $30 trip charge. There's no possible way that I'm paying you $45 an hour to tell me something that I was already aware of, to tell you something that I told you before you took the battery out. I'm not compensating you for that. So he's like, well, if you don't pay me, you're not getting your battery back. Now, I know a lot of people would have probably got upset, cursed him out, but I've learned that cooler heads prevail. And so in situations like that, you just take a deep breath and you say, okay, well, let's play ball. So I said, look, you can either bring my battery back or I can call the police. And he's like, oh, well, call the cops. I'm going to call the cops anyway. I know my rights. I stand by my work. So, and what, other than taking the battery out and going to the auto parts store, AutoZone, wherever he went to have the battery tested, I'm not sure what work he's referring to. But in his mind, he'd done enough work to warrant me paying him $45 additional on top of the $30 for a total of $75. So I called the police, the non-emergency line. I did not call 911 for this. So I called the non-emergency line, and they dispatched an officer within maybe 3 minutes. That's probably one of the best things about living in a really nice neighborhood. The police come really quick when you call. So police show up, and I'm explaining to him the situation, exactly what happened. And as I'm going over the scenario with him, the officer tells me, well, that's theft. And in my text message to the guy, I said, look, if you don't return my battery, you do realize that that's theft, or that's criminal conversion. You don't have the right to take my personal property in lieu of payment. This is a civil matter. So if you want to, you're definitely entitled to file charges against me. And, we could appear on Judge Judy or Judge Mathis, or who knows where this case could wind up. But you don't have the right to take my property and to hold my property. So he's telling me he's not going to return it. The officer says that he's obligated to. So I give the officer his phone number. The officer calls and they have an exchange, which I wasn't privy to. So I'm not sure exactly how that conversation unfolded. However, the officer comes back and says, he's going to bring your battery. I said, great. So I live in a gated community, and so when the guy arrives back to my complex, he texts me and he says he's at the gate. So I'm walking around to use my fob to open the gate so that he can come in, where the officer and I are both located. as I'm walking, as I'm walking towards him, he's on one side of the gate, I'm on the opposite side of the gate, but I have to get closer so that I'm within range for the fob to work on the receiver. So I'm walking, closer to him, not that I want to be close to him, but because I need to be closer in order to activate the gate. And he starts screaming, don't come near me. Don't come near me. Stay over there. Stay over there. Like, and so my eyebrow, like, is pretty much in my hairline at this point. It's raised so high. And so I'm just sort of laughing and smirking like, this dude is unstable. So I'm like, look, I'm just opening the gate for you. And then he's like, oh, thanks. So he gets in the car, he drives around, and the officer is talking to him. And so the officer goes over to the car, retrieves my battery. And as the officer is walking over to me, the guy drives up to where I'm standing and says, well, why was it necessary to call the cops? And I just simply responded and said, look, I don't want to talk to you. But in my head, I'm thinking, why was it necessary? You basically stole my battery and refused to return it. And you were basically trying to extort money from me for services that you did not provide. And you're asking me, why was it necessary for me to call the police? Are you kidding? So the officer puts the battery back in my car. I'm sorry, you guys. Give me just 1 second here. So the officer puts the battery back in my car. I get the battery, and as the guy pulls off, like he burns rubber out of my complex, just causing a complete scene, the officer comes back to me. He says, look, I don't think you're going to have any more problems. I think he's just upset right now, but I don't think that he's going to take it any further than that. So I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So the officer leaves. He gives me a card with an incident with a report number on it, and that's that. So literally 5 minutes after the officer leaves, I get a text message from the guy, basically saying, what goes around comes back around. And so that to me is a veiled threat. So of course I contacted the officer immediately and basically read the text to him verbatim. And the officer contacted this gentleman again and informed him that if he were to contact me again, that it would constitute harassment. And so I haven't heard from him since then. But that story taught me a lot about so many different things. And as a woman, that when you're dealing with men in certain professions, in every profession, you have to learn how to stand up for yourself. You have to learn how to speak up and not play nice, because this man was basically trying to railroad me into doing what he wanted to do on my car. And my motto is, if I pay, I say. If I pay my way. Like, you're not going to cut. Even if you're the professional and you know what you're doing and you don't want to do things my way, then you have the right to refuse service. You can tell me absolutely not. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to do it that way. And there's nothing I could do, either comply with the way that you want to do it or take my money and go elsewhere. But no one's going to take money from. I'm not going to pay for someone to tell me what to do. That just doesn't happen. Not in my world. In the words of Iyanla Vanzant, not on my watch. So I learned really that speaking up for yourself is something that you have to teach girls to do from a very early age. That, you can't always be nice. You can't always be passive. You can't always be girly, quote unquote. Sometimes, you have to stick out your chest and tap into your inner alpha female and speak up for yourself and not allow people to take advantage of you. Because that's clearly what this man was trying to do. He was really, in essence, trying to bully me into doing what he wanted me to do and how he wanted to do it. And because I was averse to his process, he was not a happy camper. Now, I was going to actually go on Craigslist and write negative reviews and, warn other people, which I'm not even sure if I'm not going to do that at this point. Um, Today, in this moment, I've decided to just sort of walk away and leave well enough alone rather than to be antagonistic by writing negative reviews. But a large part of me feels like if he does this to another woman or another person in general, that I bear a measure of culpability by not writing negative reviews because the man is unstable. Yeah, I was even contemplating having a no contact order just because he made me uneasy. So anyhow, you guys, if you need work done in your car, I highly advise do not go to Craigslist under any circumstances. I mean, unless it's life or death, go to a reputable mechanic. Go to a franchise mechanic, and that's not to say that you can't be taken advantage of at those places either, because charlatans and crooks are everywhere we look. So you have to be vigilant and watch your bottom line, watch your dollar, and make sure that you're and be informed, be an informed consumer. One of the things I think that really saved me in this particular situation was that I'd done my due diligence. I'm reading, I'm on forums and just trying to find out based on other owners what sort of issues they've had, so that when I am looking to get a problem fixed, I'm going I'm attacking it from an informed position versus a position of naivete where someone is telling me what they believe the problem is, as opposed to the two of us exchanging information and coming to some sort of mutual agreement. So anyhow, stay off Craigslist. Don't use the mechanics. If you do your research, as much research as you possibly can. Yeah, and speak up for yourself. Don't be afraid to use your voice. If it doesn't feel right, then it probably doesn't feel right for a reason. So that is my story time, you guys. As always, in closing, remember to live better, love harder, think smarter, and avoid Craigslist at all costs.